So you want to change the world and you want to do it through farming. Today it's all about balancing ideology with business. Coming up on Modern Grower. Hello, growers. Welcome to Modern Grower. I'm Diego, Diego, and for the past decade, I've interviewed hundreds of farmers about their journey into farming. I've visited farms, I've talked to them, I've read books, I've written books, and I've audio read books. I have exposed myself to a ton of market gardening, and along the way, I've learned what works and what doesn't work. And my goal is to share what I've learned with you on this YouTube channel to make your farming journey a little bit easier, hopefully a little bit more enjoyable, and hopefully a lot more profitable. That's the goal at the end of the day. And that ties into this episode as we talk about this blend of ideology and profitability. I'll say this up front. At the end of the day, the most sustainable business is a profitable business. 13, 14 years ago, I got into this sector through permaculture, wanting to change the world through the design system that was permaculture, mimicking nature. And there's a lot of good intended do-gooders in permaculture. They want to change the world. Their heart's in the right place. But one thing I learned very early on with my experience in that community at that time was there wasn't a strong sense of business. It's one thing to want to change the world, but that usually takes some money to make it happen. So how are you incorporating a profitable business into your world-changing plan? That's what we need at the end of the day. If we want to make big changes to the planet, well, we need big profits to fund those big changes. Otherwise, we're a nonprofit that solely depends on some other business's profits to do our do-gooding. So let's talk about this idea of balancing the two. Because many people come into farming with a given ideology of what they want, what they believe, what change they want to see in the world. Maybe it's changing the food system. Maybe it's making access to healthy food for people in their community. Maybe it's providing more people with food. Maybe it's improving the environment, the carbon cycle, whatever it is. But it has to blend with what you want to do in the business at the end of the day. So you have to focus first on making your business profitable. And this can be hard because the ideology is often very strong and people want to lead with that. And as somebody that I did a lot of podcasts with, Curtis Stone, would say, you have to be prepared to put it in your back pocket at the end of the day. Because for a business to make big changes, for a business to realize your full ideology, it has to be a profitable business first. Long-term impact requires long-term business survival. You can only feed so many people if your business stays in business for 6 months. If your business stays in business for 20 years, you can obviously feed a lot more people. And this is where people get lost. We visited farms that were trying to make big impacts and communities that were food deserts and give food to these people that they thought wanted it. It was, using permaculture parlance, I think they were doing a little bit of imposing the solution, saying, oh, if you guys need this healthy food, you don't have anything around here except bodegas, so you're just eating chips all day. Like, you need this healthy food. And that farm, while well-intended, didn't do very good. They ran into a lot of problems. One, the people in the community didn't really want the food that they were producing. Maybe in some communities there's not healthy food for a reason. The people there don't want it. So they were imposing a solution upon the community. They were trying to do it at a very low cost, which I think is admirable. But at the end of the day, somebody pays the price for a low cost. And in this case, it was the business, which of course depended on volunteer labor in nonprofit funds, because they had to subsidize so much of the cost of the food to get somebody to buy it that they had to get the money to fund the business some other way. You can only sell stuff so cheap before you can't sustain the business. And this farm really struggled. And I'd be curious to know if that farm is still in business today, but they were pushing ideology first. When I would argue that their ideology was amazing, but they need to pause it, put it in their back pocket for a second, and start with building a profitable business first. Build a farm that can survive financially, economically. Build a customer base that will pay full retail. Then use those profits to donate food, to offer low-cost food to a demographic that might want it. But if you can't get your business going with this kernel of a sustainable customer base, how are you going to pay for and afford to give people who can't afford it the food? You're going to be out there begging for somebody else's money. So look near term at profitability. A sustainable business is a profitable one. When I first interviewed Joel Salatin about 15 years ago, he said altruism doesn't put shoes on your feet and pay your taxes. And that's stuck with me ever since. Good intentions are merely good intentions. They don't become action until there's some money and energy to turn them from thoughts into action. So if you want to put shoes on your feet, pay your taxes, and give food to somebody else, you have to have a profitable business first. Another thing that came out of those early learnings in permaculture was ultimate sustainability. We can all design the most amazing homestead. A homestead, you harvest all your rainwater, you use all your gray water, you have chickens, you have goats, you have a cow that you milk, you have some beef cattle, you have chickens for poultry, for meat and for eggs, you have berry patches, you have fruit trees, you have nut trees, you have firewood crops, you have a vegetable garden, a flower garden, you make your own clothes, all that stuff. That's the ultimate back to the lander dream. We would all love that. People have been reading Mother Earth news since the 70s, wanting to go down that path. Thanks to the Nearings, Helen Nearing, and I can't remember her husband's name, but that's the path. But if you try and start with that homestead, you are quickly overwhelmed and underwater, and you're likely going to fail. I know of somebody who this happened to last year, bought an amazing property with a whole bunch of that stuff on it, and it went from nice, calm life to very overwhelmed life in an instant. They ended up moving off the property and c'est la vie. It wasn't for them. If you dialed back the approach and started slowly, do one thing well first, to borrow another phrase from Joel Salatin, and then add something else and add something else slowly, it makes things a little more palatable. Just like it would be hard for you to start working out and eating healthier and reading a book every day and journaling and sleeping better. Doing all those things at once is really hard. Do one thing well first and then add something else. Well, people who get into farming and permaculture think of They want to be so regenerative. They want to do everything. They want to grow their own compost crops and be no-till and donate stuff to the community and not use any sprays and not use any fossil fuels and have a bioreactor and all this other stuff. It's hard to start there. And as Gregory Landau said when I interviewed him, regenerative is a continuum. It's not a starting point. You don't have to start at the ultimate regenerative farm. You can work your way there over time. Start with a few basic regenerative principles that you can easily implement into your business now and work towards them over time. If you try to go level 10 from day one, you're going to be level 10 stressed out. And it might be very hard to implement in a profitable business. It's not going to work. When I did the Permaculture Voices conference, for people who remember that, I once got a call from somebody who wanted to start a farm. And they're like, hey, I want to get your advice on starting a farm. And they proceeded to call and talk at me for about 20 minutes, talking about literally everything they wanted to do. And it was every cool thing that you could imagine. We're going to have goats graze our crops when they're done and run chickens through and do all these things. And I'm listening to it and like, this is crazy. This person's a dreamer, not a realist. So be careful getting caught up in this. Sustainable is amazing. But if your approach to sustainability isn't literally sustainable, then you're not sustainable. So work there over time. You can also use approaches that are a means to an end. Just because you do something now, it doesn't mean you always have to do it. No-till might be the ultimate strategy in your mind for how you want to grow, but it might not be practical from day one for whatever reason, your soil, weed pressure, the amount of labor you have, that type of thing. You don't have to start there. The goal could be I work towards no-till. Maybe I start with full tillage and I gradually taper off tillage and I land at no-till. Darren Doherty once told me this story, or maybe is it a presentation that I saw as his? Sorry, I've talked to him a few times, so it might have gotten lost. About somebody in England that he was working with, consulting with, and they had a lot of land and they had a huge weed problem on their farm. And this is a trigger warning. A lot of people are going to immediately like unsubscribe when they hear this because they don't like the idea of the R word. But the farmer agreed to use Roundup for a short period of time to control the weed pressure, to enable them to get their farm on track, to sell some product, and then they moved to a system that didn't use any chemicals, and then graduated to an organic system. It was a means to an end. The weeds were so out of control that they needed something to solve it within the constraints that they had: financial, labor, equipment, all those things, time. And this is no different. Many people who love holistic medicine, they don't like modern pharma, I get it. But at the end of the day, if you're sick with some huge blood infection, are you going to try and drink some sort of mugwort tea, or are you going to go to the hospital? If you're in a car accident and you're bloody and your arm is hanging off your body, give me the drugs. Give me the stuff that can get me situated right now and fix the problem now. And then I can work on the natural stuff later on. So the immediate need may mean you're doing something that doesn't totally fit within your values, but it's a means to an end. Just because you do it once doesn't mean you always have to do it. If you're just starting to work out, maybe at the beginning you're doing cheater reps just to get going. Hey, I'm cheating. Look at me, I'm rocking. When I do my curls, they're not super strict. But that enabled me to do some curls that I otherwise wouldn't have done. It's cheating, but it's starting. And I know I'm cheating, but I'm going to get better. Landscape fabric is another common one. We sell it. It's a popular item that we sell at Modern Grower because it saves people time and labor. If you have a weed problem on your farm, I'm not talking like oh yeah, look at me, weed problem, but a grass, plantain, thistle weed problem, it can quickly put a farm out of business, demoralize a farm, make your life a living hell. So landscape fabric is a passive way to control weeds. It takes the job of physical weeding or using a collinear hoe to do the weeding, and you lay plastic on the ground. There's no light for the weed seed to get. The weed can't germinate. It can't grow. It's plastic. People don't love it. It doesn't look amazing. People don't love that. But there's no doubt about it. It saves you time and it saves you labor. And if you're a limited labor farm operation, a limited time farm operation, this is a potential solution to get you to where you want to go. You use landscape fabric now, you get your weed problem under control, and a few years from now, you're not using it anymore. So it's not always a yes or no type decision on things. It might be, no, I don't want to use it in the long term. It doesn't fit my ideology. It doesn't fit my vision. So long term, it's a no, but near term, it's a yes. And that's how you might have to step into different things on your farm, whether that's tillage, using sprays, using pieces of equipment, whatever it is. It doesn't have to start at your form of perfect. It needs to be a form that works now, gets you to survive through the season so you can get better next year. I need to live to fight another day, to play another hand. We can't get overwhelmed in the beginning. Because burnout can be an issue, whether that's mental, physical, or financial. You have to be very cautious about that. With weed overload on the farm, that can be demoralizing. It can mentally burn you out. It can ruin crops, which hurts you financially, and it can physically be demanding to pull them out. If you're trying to broad fork every one of your 100-foot beds on your farm and you have 50 of them every time you turn a bed over and it takes 40 minutes to do that, that's physically tired. It's mentally tiring. Does it make a difference? Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. So you always have to look at these things. There's a cost to everything that you do. There's a mental cost. There's a physical cost, there's an economic cost, and there's a time cost to all these things. Is your belief in doing something strong enough to pay those costs? If it is, and you have that budget to pay for them, then you pay them. But be careful allocating those resources, which are very precious. Time is precious. Your physical energy is precious. Your mental bandwidth is precious. And finances are always precious in a new business. Be careful allocating those things to things that aren't important. You may want it, but want doesn't always equal need. Want doesn't always equal important. So be careful over allocating things that cause stress to something that doesn't actually move the business. Just because it makes you feel good doesn't mean it's worth it for the business at the end of the day. Be careful around dogma, believing something that might not necessarily be true. I know I have. I know I've been on a soapbox talking to people, friends, my parents about stuff that today probably isn't true. Like it's more in the belief category versus can I prove it? And in this hippie, permaculture, alternative lifestyle, back to the land world that we all live in, It's not always science-based. You know it. I know it. There's just some things that we believe because it makes us feel good. Realize you might be wrong. I'm not saying this. This isn't a thing. No-till might not actually be better. We don't know. There's obviously some data to prove that it's beneficial and it helps. But can we unequivocally say it's better? I don't know that we can. You can believe it's better. It can align with where you want to be. But be careful, again, putting too much resources to something that you believe or think that might not be true. We're all stubborn. Trust me, I'm guilty of that. Believing things that I believe more than I know. So you might be wrong. There might be a better way. And there's some danger in uninformed enthusiasm, putting a bunch of effort into something just because you're excited about it without really knowing where it's actually going to go in terms of results. Remember, we're doing this as a business, and businesses provide services and products to customers. So while it matters what we think about as a business, ultimately we're selling a product based on what the customer wants in the product. We can impress our values into the product, but if we can't find a big enough chunk of customers to want to buy a product that harbors our values, what's the point of doing it? And they also have to be willing to pay the price to make those values possible. So again, we could make the most truly organic, beyond organic corn, whatever that means. It's out there and we're out there, giving it massages and rubbing compost tea on the shaft. Ooh, saucy. And doing all sorts of things to the soil. We're blowing kisses on it and singing it love songs. And this is the most amazing corn ever, but we have to charge $10 an ear for it. Now, it worked for Wagyu. Is it going to work for corn? Yeah, probably not. So you have to be careful. Just because it matters to you, it might not matter to the customer. Or it might matter to the customer, but the customer might not be willing to pay the cost to enable that or to support that. So while your values and your vision are important, don't lose sight of what the customer wants, what the customer values, and what the customer will pay for. Most of the time, they care about how your product fits into their story. They don't really care that you're changing the planet by your farming methods. They view it as, I'm supporting a farm, so I'm changing the planet. It's very subtle, but there is a difference. The one story is, I'm buying a product from you, regenerative farmer, so I'm helping support planetary change. That's my story. The other story is, you're changing the planet, I'll support you. Different stories. Make the customer, or oftentimes the customer wants to be the hero in their own story, not a willing participant in your own hero's journey. There's a whole theory of marketing on this, where you put the customer, you involve them in their own story, and you're feeding your product into that. So be careful that the customer cares about what you believe, align your values with the customer's needs, and emphasize the values that overlap. If you have these singular values that are really important to you, fine, do them. Makes you feel good. You're proud of your business. You can write it down. Maybe it's not a huge selling point, but it's there. While there are other things that overlap, let's say it's organic and Your customer wants organic, you want organic, bam, there's your match made in heaven. Where permaculture, they're like, I don't even know what permaculture is. And you're like, oh, it's a design science that mimics nature. And they're like, whatever. Does it taste good? Is it organic? And you're like, yeah, it's organic. Okay, good enough. So find that balance there. Be flexible. Pivot along the way. This is the personification of the episode where George breaks up with his girlfriend and he says, it's not you, it's me. And I think in reality, this can be what it is as business owners with a strong ideology. It's not the customer's fault that they don't get it. It's not the customer's fault that they won't pay for your ideology. It's me. It's not you that aren't embracing my ideals. It's my fault. I shouldn't be imposing these things upon you. So be very careful. Balance your ideology with sustainability and create a continuous method of improvement based on feedback that you get from nature, from your customers, from your own learnings. Don't be dogmatic, be flexible. Don't impose solutions. Imposing solutions just means forcing a solution onto the market. And focus on profits. Sustainability means many things to many people, but for everyone watching this who's a farm entrepreneur or a eco-business entrepreneur, sustainability first and foremost should mean you run a business that is financially sustainable. The income from the business can cover the costs to run that business now and into the future. And if you can do that, you can make a lot of change to your community, to your local food system, to your land, and to the planet. And you can take and ride that regenerative continuum off into the proverbial sunset until you eventually just get buried back into that soil that you spent so much time caring for. Masabenya, the circle of life. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you have questions, comments, let me know down below. Thank you for watching. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.